bring the mic over?
Oh, yeah, let's bring the mic over.
There we go. Now you guys can hear us.
Alrighty. Good morning. Yeah. All right, good morning. It's Easier Habits Live, your favorite 8 a.m. business strategy live stream. 8 a.m. Central Time, so join us any weekday. I'm Alec from Easier Habits, a business growth consultant.
And my name is Meg Sorensen. I am a global English communication coach and consultant.
All right, so we've been talking a lot about funnel building. This will be more about the process of work today. And
Yep.
Meg, you can take it away with a communication tip.
Yes, communication tip. Okay, so this week our communication tips are focusing on the non-verbal strategies of communication. Yesterday I talked about kind of that like intonation and prosody, right? Going up and down while you speak so that you sound more natural and easier to understand. And today I'm talking a little bit about volume. So we have a child who frequently speaks very, very loudly. Again, he's young. And so it's, he doesn't know necessarily where those limits are of his volume, but it's very jarring sometimes when he's sitting right there and he's like yelling in your face. I know some of it comes from energy and other things, but yeah, it's also something that adults struggle with as well. This idea of how loud do you speak, right? Sometimes when I get really excited, I start to get a little bit louder and oh my goodness, I get even faster and it's like so crazy, right? I speed up, I get louder. But louder does not always mean more effective. It doesn't even always mean stronger. There's a lot of power in quiet words because it makes people think. Right? It gives people that space to think. And so there's kind of two things I wanted to, focus on as far as the communication tip. One is what is the effect of the relative loudness and quietness of the things that you say. You don't want to be constantly varying, like I'm talking loud and then I'm quiet and then I'm loud and then I'm quiet. That's confusing, but it's something to notice. And then the other thing is kind of read the room a little bit about and figure out what the appropriate level is for that situation. So there are times when I'm, hanging out with Alec and we're talking loud, it's fine. There's other times when I am in a room full of Japanese people who just talk more quietly. It's just kind of a cultural thing. And so I will then modulate my volume to match them because I don't want to be like yelling at them when they're all very, kind of demure and quiet. So pay attention to the people around you and take cues from them in order to figure out your relative volume and then just kind of notice, right? Notice how loud you're talking and see if it's something that you do need to change or might think about in the future.
Awesome. So, as an update today, not every day are we going to have huge updates from the day before. I showed you my landing page with some of the statistics. The ad's still doing well, but I changed up the title and the subtitle a little bit, as well as the call to action button. I copied what another funnel did. Only around 10 people have used it, and none of them have signed up still. So this is kind of what is to be expected, that this is a novel way of marketing and it's a new value proposition for marketing. And so I'm kind of going into this expecting that one, I might try several landing pages that might not work. And as I mentioned yesterday, it may be even the value proposition itself is enough for people to click on but not take action on. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. And then this is the kind of experimentation that takes a while to figure out. I'll give you plenty of updates. But I remember when I was setting it up, I had at least a full afternoon, or most of a day, I think, of like technical issues since I hadn't updated my website in a while, and other things were going crazy. I was trying to figure out how to hook stuff up with Facebook so it could monitor it, and I'm not 100% sure I did that successfully still. So I need actual people clicking on my page and events to tell me whether Facebook is picking them up. So, but I understand that you were also running into issues, so we can talk about that.
Sure. Okay, so, we talked last week about, kind of creating that sales funnel. And I had some things come up. And so, I was like, okay, well, I'll work on that a little bit more next week. And so then next week came, i.e. yesterday. And it was like, okay, I'm going to sit down. I'm going to work on this. And at first it was just kind of like, my brain didn't want to do it. Kind of like that block I'd been talking about the previous week. Was able eventually to kind of work through that block, and, get some things done on it. But then, you'd come in the afternoon to, mention actually making the pages and getting all of that set up, so that it's easy to just put in the information. So rather than doing the information first, do the pages first, and then get that information in. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And I realized quite quickly that I didn't know exactly how to do that. And there sort of presented kind of the first block. It wasn't that like I was completely incapable of doing it. I just didn't know the exact procedural steps of setting up that landing page. And was I going to do it in, WordPress? Was I going to do it? You'd mentioned MailChimp, but I wasn't entirely sure. And so there was this whole big nebulous cloud around the exact next steps of what I was going to do, which then, caused resistance in my brain. Again, able to work through it. I started doing it, and I'm not sure what I did was right or not. I ended up doing something with a WordPress trying to figure out how to connect it to my Gmail address, but then figuring out how to make that into a landing page. My brain just stalled out, right? I was trying, and finally I'm just like, no, and so this is where, I can look back at it and say, okay, well, I'm not a web developer, right? That is not my skill set. And it's okay that I don't know how to do this. And it's okay for me to ask. Now, Alec was with our kids at the time when I was, working on all of this. And so that's why I didn't go ask him then. But it's something that today I'm looking at and thinking, yeah, I need help with this, because sure, I could try to push through all of this and do a lot of Google searching and, following tutorials and stuff. But he's a web developer. He knows how to do these things. I could just ask him.
And it's never as straightforward even for a web developer too. So it's like
True.
legitimately annoyingly hard to...
Yes.
To like... In my own process, I have found, for instance, if Facebook's a big company, I found several bugs in what they do. Stuff that straight up didn't work the way they described it.
Yeah.
And so one, it is legitimately challenging. But yeah, asking for help is a great thing to do when you get blocked. You can pay someone, or, if you're starting out, you can also barter. I mean, Meg lives with a web developer, so that's different.
Yay!
But, there's other ways to get those things. In fact, it might be helpful if you... a great way to make contact and networking if you need web services, but you provide, some other kind of service. Maybe you can figure out how to do a partnership or a joint venture with these people where you can refer clients.
Yeah. And, kind of what I wanted, to point out with that whole interaction is that this was something that, like, I'm a digital native or a digital immigrant. I understand computers. I understand how to set up an email and how to, do these other things. And I can usually figure out the process of simple things, right? I learned how to use Canva. I've learned how to use a bunch of other things, but that takes time. And like Alec mentioned, some of these are very complex. And so it becomes a, kind of cost-benefit analysis of, is it worth that time for you? Right? And for me, it didn't feel like worth the time yesterday in particular when I was just struggling and getting frustrated with it. And so figuring that out and recognizing that it's okay, that these things aren't always going to just happen automatically. And you're just going, okay, I'm going to make this landing page, and then I'm going to connect it to my email, and then I'm going to send it out to a bunch of people, and it's going to be fabulous, right? Even if you have that kind of idea in your mind going into it, recognizing as you're in the process when that's not actually happening and why that's not happening. So I was just getting, kind of in these loops of frustration yesterday, rather than just saying, oh, I guess I didn't know how to do the thing I thought I knew how to do. And so...
Well, and that's one of the reasons to try doing it try doing it with what you have is to figure out where you're at.
Yes.
Right? So, there's other software, predominantly for this type of thing, like ClickFunnels comes to mind, where there's specifically software for creating funnels. And actually just today I was finding seeing someone's landing page that had like in one little corner powered by ClickFunnels. And so that's something to check out, right? If all the other solutions are really difficult, and if they actually provide something that's straightforward, then maybe, that is the place to start building it. But start with where you are. You might be like me, where you're a little bit more familiar with MailChimp and landing pages. I asked one question for the customer service.
Yeah, see?
And got unstuck, but like that worked enough for me. I still recognize it's not ideal, but it got me in motion. It got me start actually testing my copy.
Yeah.
Versus you might find like, all right, I just don't have the tools now, and then I can research the tools. But as you're still having done it once and knowing where your problem points are, if when you go to research, it's still going to be much more focused.
Yes.
So
100%
specifically where your pain points are. So when you're looking at software, you're like, I want software that does this particular thing.
Yeah.
Right? That does, email forms and automation or whatever it is that you were having difficulty with.
Yeah.
And so that is one of the reasons why, like, do the template and try and make something first to figure out where the gaps are, because that exposes them.
Yeah.
Because you can research for days without actually exposing. Like, would you have known to research about these technical things or ask for help on these specific things? No, right? And that was another reason why I was encouraging her to try that out. Is because I know she wouldn't ask questions until she ran into problems.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard because in, so much of our lives, we are assessed on the outcome of what it is that we do rather than having any focus at all on the process.
Right.
So last week I was working with a client. She's in one of the rooms on Clubhouse that I, do like a little 20-minute lesson. And I was having people practice doing their business pitches, basically, or at least explaining what it is that they do.
Yeah.
And this was not something I'd prepared any of them for. I was just wanting to see what they could do. And she, after the fact has said, oh my gosh, that was so terrible. That was a nightmare. It was so bad. It was, all of these things. And here in my mind, I'm thinking, you're practicing speaking. You're not actually giving a pitch. This is the exact place to make these kinds of mistakes so that you know where your gaps are and what things that you do need to focus on, right? And so I'm like trying to encourage her, like, this is a process thing, not a product thing, but then in my life where I just expect myself to be able to do these things, right? And then I use that as a negative judgment. Like, how can I not do this? Why do I not know how to make this landing page? Why do I not know how to put all of these things together? And getting so wrapped up in the fact that I'm doing a bad job or not doing the job at all, rather than taking the step back and saying like, oh wait, this is about the process of that. This is about, well, I wouldn't have known that I didn't know how to do that until I tried. And so I have to be willing to try to find what those holes are, knowing that I am going to fail at times, but that's not an end fail. That's like an informative process fail, if that makes sense. Yeah. And so making, that kind of shift mentally. Right. I don't know, that's very I feel like abstract, but... Well,
there's if you study education, there's two types of tests. There's diagnostic and there's summative, right? Diagnostic is to find out where you are so that you know what to focus on in learning, and summative is, the evaluation of how well you're done. We really don't do a lot of diagnostic tests in the English or US education system, but I find that if you switch and look at everything more as a diagnostic,
right?
Rather than like a final grade of where you're at, because like you have it tomorrow, you're going to be doing something tomorrow. Like you don't really, there's very few times in your life where you need a summative grade, and that's like, if you're if you're pitching people who, if you're pitching people for money, right?
Yes.
And you're that kind of, doing a startup, like that will be a summative evaluation. Like, are you good enough to give these people enough confidence to invest in you, right? There will be some of those, but like for the most part of business, like what you are doing day to day to grow your own business, it's all diagnostic, because whatever you haven't figured out today, you can fix tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and that again, that shift from from summative to diagnostic, because summative, I feel like that's where all of my negative affect, all of that judgment, against myself comes, because I feel like I should be here, but like, how would I even know where I should be if I hadn't found that out? And so, yeah, I really like being able to frame it that way. Life is a diagnostic test. Where are you now?
Yeah.
Right? It's only summative after you die, or I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and so here's where, and we teased this a few episodes back, but here's where a few insights, I think, from Alex Hormozy come in. And I like him because he has a lot of great stuff on marketing and sales, and offer specifically. He has a book entirely on that that's fantastic. But he also has a lot of insight on mindset work, and you can clearly tell he does a lot of this.
Yeah.
But a couple of things he talks about are ways that you can make time work for you.
Yep.
And one of those is, he says that if you are, when you're getting into this phase and you're terrible at something and you're feeling that resistance, you ask yourself the question, is it reasonable for me to be good at this yet?
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just not. And you need to step back. And when you are good at school and can, do well on a test without studying and don't have to put in the work, you form very unreasonable expectations of what you should be able to do on the first shot.
Yep.
Because you're working on stuff calibrated, let's be honest, stuff that's not hard, that's calibrated towards lowest common denominator, rather than business, which is always hard. Because you're competing with a lot of other really bright people.
Yeah.
And ambitious people. If they weren't at least some level of competent and ambitious, then they wouldn't either be starting a company or have a functioning company. And you have to compete with all these people who are selected, evolutionarily to be good at what they do, right? And so that's a lot more challenging. So, and then the flip side of that, the making time work for you, is think through, like, give yourself an honest assessment. How much practice would it take for it to be unreasonable for me to be bad at this, right? You do so much practice that it would be unreasonable for you to be bad. And that's a lot of work. So I think a lot of people just don't really think through that. But that is a mental flip. Like, if something is really difficult for you, just commit to do enough work that it would be unreasonable for you to be bad at it.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's actually a really nice switch, because then it puts the burden less on, you as a person and your capabilities or whatever, and more responsibility on the process, which is where it should be. Right.
Well, and it shifts responsibility for you from being good now, right, to you being consistent.
Yes.
And that's still a problem for a lot of people. You still, like, that is its own skill, building your routines and habits and building up the level of consistency. A lot of people have to start small and then extend the time that they're doing something. But what you're looking for is building the consistency. And then the other thing that he said that was interesting about where to invest your time in business. So that's kind of like how to think through things that you're bad at, but like where to invest time in your business. So Alex Hormozy is someone who was really good at his offers, and apparently he resisted doing social media for a long time because it takes a lot of investment where you're basically getting no return on investment. Yeah. But then he started thinking, all right, if I were to invest in things that I know would work in the long term, right? Like the best long-term investment that like that time would work for me, I would do social media marketing, because ads just dry up as soon as you stop spending. Yeah. But like the content that you put out there on the internet, especially in certain channels, can be like YouTube, can be found forever. Yeah. And so that is more investment of time, where like time can work for you, and that switched. And then he did something like crazy, like grow accounts to 1 million followers in 6 months or something. He went all in. At that point, he built up big businesses and could like pay like several staff members to be helping him with the videos, producing the videos, chopping them up into different, media segments. So if you're a solopreneur, you're not going to be able to do that immediately. But that mindset, like, what if I did that now would yield dividends forever. And so like
Yeah.
going to one expo, for example, is going to yield a few contacts now, but figuring out the powerful marketing technique, like, okay, even though that specific marketing technique won't last forever for you, but it will last a while before like that particular value proposition changes or the market changes, right?
Yeah.
But the skills you develop while you practice so long it becomes unreasonable for you to be bad, like those skills of like research and testing, those will be applicable for your whole business career, right?
Yeah.
And so these are the things, this is making time work for you by investing in the things that will give you the long returns rather than putting a lot of energy like into these events that give you some small return but not enough to scale your business.
Well, and that's where you also have to take a step back as just like a human being, because from a marketing standpoint, the business trips, the expos and stuff that I went on, not effective as far as getting clients, but were they incredibly rewarding experiences that I absolutely loved? Heck yes. Like they were wonderful and amazing, but they were not made for building my business. And if my goal right now is to build my business, then I need to be working on these other skills. And if I don't like doing those other skills, then I have to either figure out how to get somebody else to do it, or maybe pick another line of work, because that's just part of being a solopreneur, is you have to do all of the things. You have to wear all of the hats. And just because you're really good at wearing one hat doesn't mean you're going to be good at all of the other ones. And so, way back in 2015 when I was doing life coach training, one of the biggest things was, that my trainer, was getting across, was the idea that it doesn't take all that much to learn how to be a good coach if that's where you're already inclined. The place where most coaches kind of slip up is that it's not about being a good coach, right? You have to own your business. You have to be able to promote yourself and do this SEO and marketing and everything like that. And so, when people are like, I want to be a life coach, they have to ask themselves, well, do I also want to be a marketer? Because they kind of go hand in hand if you are doing that solopreneur thing. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, okay, I've got this. Am I willing to do this so that I can do this, right?
Yeah.
The stuff that I really like, which is the interacting with people, the, coaching and the training and all of that, accompanied with the freedom to set my own schedule, right? That wouldn't happen necessarily if I was, working at a 9-to-5 job. And so being able to frame it that way can help me figure out the relative importance of me learning that skill, right? That skill that I don't necessarily have yet, but then I can see that it will facilitate me doing the stuff that I do like doing, and my whole reason for doing this career in the first place. And then it'll give me the motivation to learn it and the understanding that I'm not going to be stuck learning how to do this forever. At some point, I will have done it enough that it will be unreasonable for me not to be good at it.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a really nice kind of like mindset shift. At least for those who are like, oh yeah, well, marketing, I'm not a good marketer, but whatever. And I think that's kind of how I had been trying to do it for so long, is I always just let other people, do referrals. And that was enough for me for a while, but it's not getting me the type of client that I want.
Right. When you niche down and want a specific type of client at a specific price point rather than whatever comes, then you really need to shift into that. And you can pay people to help, but there's a certain level of engagement that you would still want to work with, because even at the end of the day, right, if your business model relies on paying somebody else to do your marketing for you, which I think is a missed opportunity that I can circle back to. But even at the end of the day, if you're paying someone else to do it, if they go out of business or, it's not a good fit or whatever, you have a new company, are you going to have to start from scratch with them? Or do you know enough that you can tell them about their audience and what they, what they want, general value proposition you have, and, how to target them, etc. And so, unless you want like a steep drop off in clientele when there's kind of some kind of shift in who you're using for marketing, then you want to be able to master at least the strategy and, the targeting and knowing your audience. Now, the missed opportunity there is really talking to anybody as a marketing opportunity.
Yeah.
So if you get really good at identifying your your market's pain points by testing ads, you will recognize potential clients in person or in other interactions so much more quickly. You'll be able to confidently share your services so people always know about, your services without being spammy if you're doing it well, right? And so, like, for people who are not good marketers, this is a good exercise because like some way, shape, or form, you have to share who you are. And if you're not confident in sharing your own value, then that's going to carry across all sorts of business opportunities. And basically there'll be all sorts of doors that stay shut that you never knew were there unless you try and open them with marketing. So that's one of the reasons why I think every business owner should get good at marketing. And that's where you ask, like, if this is a deal breaker, then you really either do need a partner. Or you do need to, work for somebody else's company where that's handled, right? That is one of the benefits of working for somebody else. If it's not a deal breaker, you can accelerate it, by paying for services that still require you to be involved in some level or getting coaching on it. So those are kind of your options. And take a look and be honest about which one works for you. I was volunteering as a business coach at a local nonprofit, and there was a guy who wanted to sell patents. He kept saying, "I'm not a business. I don't want to sell or market. I just want people to buy my patents." And that was one of the funny things. What I discovered is a lot of people, this nonprofit, like the mentors were like really good technicians, but they weren't necessarily very good coaches, because they would get people who would who would say, "I want to start a company." Well, what do you want to do? I want to do something with like cool technology and experiences or something, right? And it's like, it's not a technical problem at all. It's, or like, I don't want to learn how to sell stuff. I just want people to buy my stuff and that technical stuff. And you'd have to walk people through that process. Like, all right, well, how are people supposed to find out? How are people supposed to have confidence that they'd make money by buying this? Like, why, when they get 100 emails a day, why would you emailing someone do that? Or, you're trying to get newspapers to feature your thing. That's marketing. Why don't you that's a skill. So, and at the end of the day, if you really don't want that, then you don't want to be selling your own thing. You want somebody else to be selling it.
And that's where radical honesty is very valuable, right? Because it's okay to not want that thing, right? You just have to also then accept the consequences of that not wanting, right? And so, like, it's, people say you can't have it both ways, and everyone's like, oh, you can have it all. It's kind of somewhere in the middle, right? But you have to be honest about what the situation is before you can make that decision.
And I think probably for the both of us, like, a big reason why we're interested in starting our own business is just because we didn't see the type of work we want to do in a lot of traditional media. So, I mean, one of the things that I was an engineer, like, I enjoyed the process of engineering, but it drove me absolutely nuts that people, and this is, I guess we can go into the business tip of the day, the thing that drove me nuts. All right, process beats strategy. Often in the very first attempt, but always over the long term, process beats strategy. And so I would work for companies where they had a cool new strategy product that they thought through and they put so much effort into it, it couldn't possibly fail. And I would point out, like, we're not doing minimum viable product. We're not releasing in small chunks and testing so that, we could learn and hear the results. And they're like, no, that's fine. We're not going to do that. This is an exception. We know this works for another company already, so we're just going to do what the other company does, but we're going to do it with a cooler UI. And it fails, and then after the fact, they'd be like, we should have done it that way. But people are in this mindset of like, oh, if I have the right information or the right strategy, that's what I'm gonna need. And really, this whole chat has been about how, like, look, it's process that gets you there in the long run. Like, occasionally someone gets lucky, but more often than not, than the people that get lucky, it's because they already had a good process in place. and then, the new strategy augmented that. But really what strategy does is it focuses your judgment and skill.
Yeah.
If you don't have any judgment or skill in an area yet because you haven't actually done anything, then you have nothing to focus. All right. And what you need is a process, right? A routine that gets you experience so that you can build that judgment and skill. And then when you reflect on that, that's when you get the strategy that works for you, but people want to jump to that without actually having this underlying skill and judgment. It doesn't work. You need the whole process.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. I want to take that clip and play it on repeat or something like that. Because it's so much about that. And it's, all of these things that I've been talking about on here, over the last month. None of this is new to me. None of this is I struggle, with this, that, and the other thing. But what is new is actually making strides in facing that and in finding ways around and through a good understanding. And so I've always known the importance of process, right? But again, it's different knowing the strategy and actually implementing it. Right. Yeah. And so, on a very meta level, it's, understanding the process of business and understanding how to get the process of making a process. Yeah. Does that make sense? It's so yeah.
Well, I mean, that's what coaching is. Yes. On one level is actually setting in place as a process things that people avoid, such as a strategic review of what's working and what's not. And so a daily check-in on that makes a profound difference.
It's huge. And this has been, I just think every day how much I have learned even in this last month about this because of this coaching relationship, the things that you point out that I then can't hide from anymore. Which is good. It holds me accountable, and I don't want to hide from those things anymore. And so it gives me, I don't want to say extra incentive and motivation to work through it, but a little bit, I have, I guess more reason to work through these things because I also feel like I can. I've got you there to help me. And so I'm not doing it alone. I know, or I have faith, I believe, right, that this will be, I'll figure it out eventually because I have somebody else. Whereas before I wouldn't have even bothered trying because it's just me and who knows if I can even do it. So what's the point? So I love this. Yep. This is really good and empowering and awesome.
And one of my other clients was saying the other day, as I'm still learning about all right, how do you perceive the benefit? And I'm asking people what does this work for you? What are the first benefits you get from coaching? And her comment was that immediately talking to somebody else and clarifying my goals reduces my anxiety. I have a clear path, and I don't feel like I have to do it alone.
Yeah.
And
it's huge.
that shift from the moment you sit down and you're I have somebody that I can give all of this stuff to, and we can sort it out and we can find what's most important, that alone helps keep things going. And then it's just the daily check-in, or weekly in most cases, weekly check-in in terms of accountability that creates a process. But if you don't have a coach, figure out your own process. Journal at the end of the day. That's a great way to be self-accountable. You can join groups, you can have accountability partners. I have one of those myself who, we go over our goals at the end of each week. So there are different ways to build in these routines of accountability and to help you with your process, to give you time to think about your process. Because that's the other thing. Yeah. I think, process is important, but how much time do you spend actually improving your process?
Yes. Oh right? My goodness, yes.
And so most people just don't dedicate the time or thought necessary to improve their processes, and that's why I have a job.
Yeah. So. Right?
All right. So thank you for signing in or watching this video. We are live at 8 a.m. Central every weekday morning. So subscribe, please share this so we can grow a community of entrepreneurs. Our next big goal for this channel is to have people live that can chat, ask us questions, check in, because we would like to build an interactive community of entrepreneurs that can be supporting each other and who we can help by addressing your questions live. So go ahead and subscribe and check us out at 8 a.m. Central every weekday morning.
All right.